Hello there, my name is Zero, and today I'm going to be going over some feedback and my proposed Affliction Warlock spec tree changes for Midnight. This is being written and recorded on the 11th of November, 2025, so everything obviously is subject to change. Starting things off with some of my initial notes. Overall, I believe the new Affliction tree in Midnight is a very good first draft, albeit I feel it needs a couple of tweaks to make it even better. I'll briefly go over the current tree, again as of 11/11/25, what I feel are the current issues with it, and then showcase my slightly reworked tree and proposed changes I have. Also, just a side note, pour one out for my boy Malefic Rapture. I know many people hated it, but I enjoyed my time with it. Without further ado, just get into the rest of this. Starting off with some of the current issues with the spec tree. First up, we have the first gate of the Affliction tree. I'm using Wowhead because I don't have access to Alpha or Beta yet. So I'm just going to be using Wowhead instead. Overall, I believe the flow of the tree and how everything flows is really nice. Albeit there's some small tweaks I'd like to see. Starting off with kind of the main point is I feel Drain Soul should just become Affliction's filler spell. I get the idea of having Shadow Bolt and or Drain Soul as a choice node, but at this point, I would rather have Drain Soul be Affliction's filler spell to both give it a unique filler spell, and to avoid the Mind Spike versus Mind Flake conundrum that Shadow Priest had. Moving on, Summoner's Embrace feels like a mandatory talent to take. However, Shared Agony does as well. This results in potentially needing to spend 9 points in this first gate. Just making an example, you probably need. You could probably skip Practice Pestilence, and go into Shared Agony to get Absolute Corruption, but then you've already spent 8 points if you unlock the next row, but you're pretty much taking Summoner's Embrace everywhere. So it feels really bad having to spend 9 points in this first gate, which can feel particularly suffocating when it comes to more building builds of the spec tree. And moving on to gate 2, which is kind of this middle section over here, and we run into some more problems. The predominant issue lies, I believe, in this middle section of the tree, with Xavius Gambit, Seeds of Destruction, Sacrilash, Sudden Onset, and Summon Darkglare. Xavius Gambit and Seeds of Destruction are perfectly fine talents. They're tuning nodes. They're nodes that are good. You're probably taking them. The issue lies in their related pathing. What I mean by that is Sacrilash, I believe, is the primary issue, as it leads directly out of Seeds of Destruction and AoE based talent. This is particularly annoying, especially for Hellcaller builds, as those builds would require you to spend 2 additional talent points to pick up Sacrilash, which is usually a talent taken for Hellcaller based builds, since Hellcaller turns Corruption into Wither, and it gains all the benefits from like Sacrilash, Nocturnal Yield, what have you. Sudden Onset is okay. Nothing to really say about it. I think it'll ultimately depend on how much damage Agony does, but I'll go into more changes later on. And then just kind of final gate, nothing. Has some issues, but nothing too egregious. I believe Fatal Echoes and Cloying Power should swap places. Cloying Power feels more like a talent you would want everywhere, where Fatal Echoes is definitely more of a single target oriented node. It feels really bad having to essentially pay the toll to get something that is universally applicable, but having this here and this here, I feel like would sort of fix that issue. That being said, I also feel Cloying Power should have a cap on the percent damage buff it gives, so it doesn't create a confusing conundrum of trying to, like, say, mass spread Unstable Affliction and Mythic Plus, while also trying to use Seed of Corruption in AoE, which is the intended, I guess it's the intended spender for AoE is Seed. I feel like capping this at like, say, I don't know, 12%, so 3 different UAs active would be perfectly fine. But again, this is kind of more, this is another thing I have more proposed changes on later on. And then kind of like capstone wise, Calamity's fine, Soul Miser's fine, Afflictions is fine. Malefic Grasp, I believe, should just become its own button. At current, there's no real way of accidentally wasting a proc of Grasp since it procs off of Nightfall. If this is more of a case if you're spamming a Shadow Bolt, unless you're using a no channeling macro, which I feel shouldn't be mandatory in order to have you not waste Malefic Grasp, essentially. Having it become its own button that lights up whenever you get a proc of Nightfall, I feel would be better, as well as letting you keep that Nightfall proc for your filler spell. Everything else is fine. Patient Zero is fine. Soul of the Seeds is fine. Death's Embrace, I really like that it's super execute talent now. But yeah, these are all the current issues I have with the Affliction. Now to move on to my proposed changes. So this, on the right-hand side, is my little custom tree that I've made. If you've been following the channel for a bit, you would know that I have a hobby of making these custom trees out of passion, just to innovate and improve upon things I enjoy. So looking at my tree side by side with the current Midnight tree, they are pretty much the same, although with some changes. In gate 1 of my tree, I've gotten rid of Hexweaver, which is the 2% haste node, and I've just moved Summoner's Embrace over there. I feel like having the 2% haste and the 2% mastery is nice, but realistically, you could probably get rid of the haste and just move this here, just for posterity's sake. And then in Summoner's Embrace's spot, which is right here on the Alpha tree, I added Soul Swap, which reads as: copies your damage over time effects and haunt from the target, preserving the duration. Your next use of Soul Swap within 10 seconds exhales a copy of the damaging effects onto a new target. I feel like with Affliction returning to a dot-focused playstyle, I feel like this was a worthy inclusion to bring back into the spec tree and out of the PvP tree. Bringing Soul Swap and placing it where it is, I also feel, has helped with that having to spend 9 points in the first gate problem that has been mentioned by other creators, such as Kalamazi. Its purpose is to be a powerful node in a multi-target or priority target scenarios, and is by no means mandatory. So, like, just for example, you can essentially path out of it, and like you go on Drain Soul, boom. You don't have to talent into this unless you don't want to, but you can still get access to the rest of the tree afterwards. Moving on, I've also merged Sudden Onset, which is Agony damage increased by 10%, and now starts at 3 stacks, and the Shared Agony increased by 10%. Agony now hits another enemy within 15 yards. I just merged them together, changed it into Agony damage is increased by 15%, starts at 5 stacks. The stack count honestly could change with Agony only going up to 10 stacks now. This starting at 3 stacks could still be fine, and now hits another target within 15 yards of the target you applied on. I feel like just merging those two nodes together is nice because it kind of feels weird having 2 talent points that could just be a single point, but that's me. Nightfall, I also altered to allow you to channel Drain Soul while moving, while also removing Improved Shadow Bolt from the tree, again, to give Affliction its own unique filler spell. Moving on to Gate 2, which is all this stuff. I moved Summon Darkclear underneath Xavius' Gambit and Seeds of Destruction. This was done for a few reasons. I feel like this, like, kind of pathing it all this way flows better by mirroring the Demonology tree, which, if I just bring up, This is what the demonology tree currently looks like on alpha. So it kind of goes finisher node of gate 1 into the 2-point nodes into your primary demon. This was also done to allow Dark Lair to path into Sacrilege as well as Relinquished, which are both universally applicable nodes. This would allow for Sacrilege to be acquired easily for Hellcaller based builds, or Relinquished to where it's not down here in a kind of awkward spot. I feel like having these two nodes, which are generally universal, free out of Dark Lair, it kind of just feels better flow-wise. Minor note, I changed Cunning Cruelty to just proc off of any damage dealt instead of just through your filler spell. Being completely honest, I feel like this talent could be something more thematic, but I couldn't think of anything at this point in time, so it's just kind of there. And then moving on to my proposed Gate 3 changes. So as I mentioned earlier, I would like Clawing Power and Fatal Echoes to switch places. Clawing Power would be a 2-point node with, it reads, each enemy affected by your unstable affliction increases all damage you deal by 2% up to a max of 6%, and then the 2-point value is 4% up to 12%. Again, this was just sort of help with the weird AoE conundrum of how many UAs do you spread to get that damage buff. This one make it to where it's 3 targets max no matter what, but it's right here, so you don't have to pay the 2 points just to get this. Fatal Echoes also, I just changed it to a 1-point node and buffed its value from 8 to 12%. I don't know how strong the 8% will be overall, but I felt like 12% was probably a little bit better. Moving on to my next proposed change, which is to Malevolent Visionary. On retail and on alpha, it reads, increases the damage of your Dark Lair by 70%. When Dark Lair extends damage over time effects, it also seriously affected targets for shadow damage. Basically, you push Dark Lair, it does an upfront burst of damage. I changed the single instance of burst damage that it does currently to having Dark Lair instead cause the damage over time effects it extends to do their damage 25% faster, similar to the talent Creeping Death. This was done more so to have Dark Lair feel like a more super impactful cooldown that enhances your dots beyond just extending them. While this is a neat idea, I feel, I also don't know if this would be considered overpower. And then on to my final proposed changes, which is the Seed of Corruption, kind of capstone pathing. So what I did was I moved Patient 0 to the top of the pathing and made it a 2-point node. 25-50% for a Seed of Corruption damage to its host. That's fine. So the seed's exactly the same. You shoot out 3 seeds now. The other 2 are at 50% effectiveness. At the bottom, I added Soul Flame, as I feel like having the 2 extra seeds from Sow the Seeds was neat as a capstone. It just felt very underwhelming. Soul Flame, I feel, adds a bit more flair that Affliction had in Legion, which is fitting considering Affliction is more or less returning to its Legion incarnation. But yeah, that's kind of it. Thanks for watching. This wraps up my Affliction Warlock feedback video and my kind of proposed changes. I hope you guys enjoyed, and let me know what you think about the video in the comments below. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.